Jazz from Yorkshire Peaches Therapies, and welcome back to the channel. On today's video, I'm going to be having a look at something that's completely different to what I usually have in my household, and that is cold pressed food. Now, you'll notice that the bag has been opened and a lot of the contents has been consumed. So I will be discussing that. I think it's really important that when we talk about how we feed our dogs, that we don't alienate people. It's not a case of it's raw or nothing, or it's fresh or nothing. Even just learning how to read pet food labels and even just adding in a little bit of fresh has health benefits to it. So this was, I believe it was Tesco's that it was in. So this is the Forthglade's cold pressed chicken and sweet potato, and this is the 2 kg bag. I believe this was around the £11 mark, but this was it was like on a club card offer thing. So I thought, do you know what? I will grab it and have a look at it. So the first thing to talk about, let's talk about the packaging. So the packaging is handy. It can stand on its own. I like that it's come in a smaller bag, because when we buy things in these huge, great big sacks, usually it can be more cost effective when you buy it in bigger amounts. However, things are left to just get a little bit minging and a little bit sweaty for longer than what we would like. Just because it's a dry food doesn't mean that it is immune to growing mold spores on it or getting dust mites. So I do prefer smaller bags of dry food if you are buying dry food. So it's advertised as a complete meal, and it's also grain-free. Complete means that every time you feed this to your dog, it has every single amino acid, vitamin and mineral needed to sustain life. So you could just feed something that is complete and be hitting those levels for the most part. And it says it's hypoallergenic and it's for all dogs 2 months plus. Now Forthglade, they also do a wet food range. I use the wet food, like if you're doing like enrichment stuff or Kongs or something like that, I tend to lean into the wet food. But Forthglade, on the whole, they're a company that I don't recoil in horror. If someone mentions their dog has been fed Forthglade, it's a pretty well respectable brand. Now, it says vet approved. I don't know who that vet is, but it says vet approved, so there's a vet. It's made with natural ingredients, and this is chicken and sweet potato is for good gut health. Another thing that I like about this packaging is that it's got this little love heart window. Hang on. There we go, a little love heart window here, so you can actually see what the food is like before you open it. Another thing about the packaging, it's resealable at the top. So I'll open it, and it's got like these little kind of like plastic teeth, so you can reseal it. Again, when we are feeding dry food products, we want to reduce the amount of oxygen that can get to it, reduce the risk of dust mites from stored food. So making sure it's in something, either a resealable bag or a resealable container, is going to be that little bit better. So I'm going to start looking at the back of the packet now. So Forthglade natural pet food since 1971. We're a bunch of Devonian, so Devon dog lovers on a mission to make your relationship with your biggest fan as nourishing as it can be. So we use no junk, no fillers, just natural wholesome ingredients, gently pressed together to lock in natural goodness. This is best friend food and tail waggingly good. So the term cold pressed, that refers to how the food has been manufactured. So when something's cold pressed, they're processed or manufactured at much lower temperatures. The reason that this is ultimately better is when things are treated at lower temperatures, it helps retain nutrients, and so basically when you cook at high temperatures, it can denature a lot of the good stuff that you've actually put in. So cold press, if you are feeding something like a dry food, cold press is something to be looking out for. It also explains on here about cold press. So cold press process is a natural way to preserve nutrients that are essential for growth, digestion and good health. And then they've got 3 points as well. We take good quality ingredients, only heating the ones that need it. Chicken, sweet potato, and then they add in vitamins, oils and minerals. So they'll add in their premixes. Again, it's a complete, so for them to have that word complete on, they have to have in all the amino acids, vitamins and minerals that a dog may need in every single meal. Point number 2, they gently press them at low temperatures to seal in the natural goodness and flavour. That's another thing as well. When things are cold pressed, they are more palatable because they've not been cooked at really super duper high temperatures, which completely denatures the product and then completely devoids them all flavour. So then you have to pump in loads of oils to then make it palatable. So cooking that cold press process is really important, and then creating great tasting bite-sized pellets that are easy to digest. It's bursting with goodness. So it's got vitamins and minerals. It's grain-free, which I know is really important to a lot of pet parents, especially with dogs having an increase in tolerance to grains. Finding something that's hypoallergenic and it doesn't contain that grain is really important. It's nutritionally balanced. It's got yucca extract. Yucca extract, I believe, is for digestive health. So this one is called Good Gut Health. It's got fruit, botanicals, and then it's hypoallergenic. So a thing that I like about this packaging is that you've got a feeding guideline as well for your dog. So dependent on their weight, it gives you recommendations for what you should be feeding a puppy and adult and senior as well. So with these recommendations and these guidelines, it is just that. It is a guideline. It can't possibly take into account every single possibility of every single dog's medical condition and metabolism, So it is just a guideline. If you're feeding a certain amount and your dog is absolutely piling on weight, then, maybe adjust it, and that particular recommendation for the amount of food you're feeding isn't going to be the one. You've also got the opposite of that. Say you have a working line dog that has, a really active metabolism and you're struggling to keep weight on them and you don't want to go outside of those guidelines, try looking at increasing the foods. But obviously there's going to be health concerns that are going to impact how your dog retains the nutrition. So this is a complete pet food for dogs that are 2 months plus. So you can serve on its own or mix with Forthglade wet food. I know that's really popular with people who feed Forthglade. They'll feed a mixture of the wet and the dry. If mixing, adjust the amounts accordingly. There's more info on the website. Dogs' tummies can be sensitive to change, so introduce the cold press gradually over 2 weeks, starting with a 50-50 mix with the current food and slowly increasing the ratio of cold press. So that's really helpful for people who are, maybe moving from ultra-processed food, such as, I can say just something really awful, like Asda Hero food is just awful. So it's good that they've got a little transition guide on the back, and make sure fresh drinking water is always available. I'm pretty sure you get that recommendation for water in all kind of feeding packets. Perfect for mixing with our complete grain-free wet meals. It's tail-waggingly good. It's also asking you to recycle the bags, so making positive paw prints on our planet, people and pooches. Recycle with bags at larger stores. So I'm assuming that supermarkets will have some kind of recycling facility for these. It's produced in the EU for Forthglade, which is registered in Devon. They have an email and they have a telephone number. They have a best before date and a batch date as well, and it states that it's not for the EU. So now we can get into the nitty gritty bit. Let's have a look and see what these ingredients are. So this is really positive. The first thing in a chicken and sweet potato cold pressed food is chicken. So that's 32.5%. So that's 17.5% freshly prepared chicken. What is freshly prepared chicken? Do I feel like that's a little bit of fluffy language to make the chicken sound better? Potentially. I would just say chicken. 15% dried ground chicken, which is also fine. Dried sweet potato, that's 28%. Dried peas, poultry fat, gelatin, you've got 1%, oh no, wait a minute. Dried beet pulp, dried fruit, that makes up 2.3%, and that's apples, pears, blueberries and cranberries. You've got 1% salmon oil. You've got brewer's yeast, dried botanicals make up 0.6%, which is fennel, nettle, and dandelion. Again, fennel, nettle, and dandelion do have really lovely health properties, but if it's 0.6%, is it going to be enough to make an impact? I don't know. I doubt it. You've got something that I can't actually pronounce. Monooglyceride, which sounds like some kind of fat. Egg powder, chicory extract, dry seaweed, chamomile, flaxseed, glucosamine, chondroitin, and yucca. Yucca is 0.02%. So they put on that, yeah, it's got yucca extract in it, but it's 0.02%. So is there actually any point putting it in? It's a little bit of a cheeky thing that pet food companies can do. They're not lying. It does have yucca extract in it, but it's 0.02%. But one thing I do like is on all of these ingredients, they'll have like a little star or like a little cross. So if it has a cross, it means the ingredients have been thermally pre-treated prior to cold pressing. So I think that's really transparent of them to list that. So that would be the flaxseed, the egg powder, the salmon oil, the peas, the potato, the ground dry chicken, and chicory extract. They have all been pre-treated before. Again, they've made such a big thing about this is cold pressed, about the manufacturing process, so I think that's good that they've listed what the manufacturing process is for particular ingredients and kind of coded it. They've put in the additives, so that's your vitamin A, vitamin D3, vitamin E, vitamin C. Additives doesn't necessarily mean something bad, but when you are dealing with a dry food, cold pressed food, because it's been heat treated, even though it's lower in temperature, which makes it a cold press, you are still applying temperature changes to it, so they are going to have to put in those vitamin and mineral mixes into it. You've got your trace elements, so that's copper, zinc. They've got two different types of zinc. So this is just a synthetic premix. I'm not going to kind of go into it. And then the antioxidants, they've got extracts from vegetable oil. They've also got the analytical constituents. So let's have a look at the fat. So crude fat is 12%. So that's nice. That's relatively low. It'd be interesting to compare that to other dry food products, but I'd say that's relatively low. Again, I'm always thinking about dogs that have had pancreatitis, or they have grumbling pancreatitis, and they need to make sure they're fed a diet that's 10% or less in fat, but 12% you could potentially get away with. It also gives instructions on storage, so store in a cool, dry place away from direct sunlight. This pack is resealable, and ensure the bag is tightly sealed after each use. Consider transferring the contents into an airtight container for extended freshness. Once open, consume within 1 month. Although this product contains a grain-free recipe, it is produced in a factory which handles grain. Again, it's showing that transparency. And then on either side here, you've got the feeding guidelines. I believe that's that's German. What have we got on the other side? Oh, okay. This is just a little thing about their products. So love a QR code, so you can go straight onto their website. We have a wide selection of tail-waggingly tasty, complete and complimentary wet foods for dogs. Why not try our tasty treat range? They are grain-free and packed with natural ingredients. So that's kind of a walk through the packet. So let's have a look and see what it looks like inside. Okay. Right. Whew. So this is, try and get the camera to focus. Go like that. There we go. Okay. So they are pellets. I think they'll probably be processed in so it'll be like one long tube, and then it'll get broken down. They're a little bit dusty. I wouldn't consider these like massively oily. Like sometimes when you handle some dry food, I mean, good God, that smells really strong. But sometimes when you're handling dry food, they leave like an oil on your hand, whereas this really isn't oily. It's a little bit dusty, probably from pieces breaking. So I can just break it in my fingers like that. So you can make it into smaller pieces, but that isn't oily. That isn't oily. That's if I were to feed a dry food, I would be leaning into the cold pressed food. And for this, it was like I say, like £11 or something like that. So the reason that I picked this up is obviously I wanted to start talking about different food types that we can be feeding our dogs. But I use scatter feeding a lot in my house. My dogs are a mixture of, well, they're predominantly raw fed, but I've got one dog that's on a hybrid of predominantly cooked food, and then with some raw mixed in. Now, I use scatter feeding because I've got 3 dogs that are absolutely nuts. So when someone comes to the door, it's an absolute nightmare. So one of the things I do is I grab like a handful of treats or something like that and chuck them on the floor. Now, if you're feeding 100% meat treats, that gets very expensive very quickly. So I've been looking at different options. So looking at, you know, good quality dry foods. Can I use these for scatter feeding? It was palatable for the dogs. The 2 things that I noticed though, when I'd done a scatter feeding session, they'd eat everything and then they were very thirsty. Now, because they used to been fed fresh food, they're not used to eating this sort of food in large quantities. It wasn't enough for them to have like a meal's worth. But again, it's just interesting. They were thirsty because they were eating this dry food. But secondly, I had to stop using it for scatter feeding. Because one of my dogs was inconsolably itchy off it. Now, I think this is potentially down to an intolerance to chicken, which isn't unheard of. So we removed using this particular food for scatter feeding, and the itching seems to have gotten a little bit better. We're not fully out of the woods yet, but there's definitely been a difference. Now, that's not to say that Forthglade cold pressed food is going to make your dog itch. That's not the case. That is just something that I'd seen with my dogs. So all of them were thirsty. One of them got itchy. So we aren't going to use this for scatter feeding anymore. But would I consider another protein in the Forthglade range that doesn't contain chicken? Yes, I would for scatter feeding. I'm going to just reseal that up. So you can see that I've filled a whole treat jar with the stuff, and it took maybe like a couple of weeks to notice that actually I think this is what the issue is, because this was the only thing that had changed. Doesn't mean it will make your dog itchy, but it's something to consider. If you have a dog that has sensitivities, does she have sensitivity to raw chicken? It's not something that we feed in vast amounts. She's on a rotation between 5 to 7 proteins over a 2-week period. But we've never really had a problem with chicken. It was just this. So it could be something else. It could be the sweet potato in it that she didn't agree with, whatever it is. Or it could be the fact that it's just processed chicken and that means she can't tolerate it. But if someone was asking me for dry food recommendations, would I recommend Forthglade? Because again, raw feeding, fresh feeding isn't for everyone. Would I recommend Forthglade? Yes, they are a brand that I would recommend. And would it be something for people to consider, if they wanted to do the same as me, raw feed but scatter feed with like a dry food? Yes, but just be mindful that it does make them a bit more thirsty. It made my dogs a little bit more thirsty, but yeah, I think it's okay. I'm always a bit like about recommending dry food, but I'd love everyone to be feeding a fresh food or a wet food or something like that. But I do think this is a good option for people whose lifestyles or budget or whatever doesn't suit feeding fresh food. I do think Forthglade, I think it's a good option. So there you go. That's my walkthrough of Forthglade. If you have enjoyed this video, please make sure to like, share and subscribe. But for now, lots of love to you and your dogs, and I'll speak to you soon. Take care. Bye.